Welcome back to Sex and Space. Today, we've got an awesome interview to share with the brilliant Dr. Niobe Way. Dr. Way is a developmental psychologist, professor at NYU, an internationally recognized expert on the social and emotional development of teenagers. With nearly 40 years of groundbreaking research, she's become a leading voice on topics such as friendships, boy culture, and the mental health challenges facing young people today. Her new book, Rebels with a Cause, Reimagining Boys, Ourselves and Our Culture, takes a bold and thought-provoking look at how our cultural expectations of boys are harming not only them, but society as a whole, and what we can do to change it. Love a like, follow, share, and subscribe if you're digging the content, and check us out over at sexandspace.com. Let's get into it. Niobe Way, welcome to Sex and Space. Thank you very much for your precious time. This is highly valuable. I've read the book, Rebels with a Cause. Absolutely loved it. Can't wait to delve into this. I mean, this isn't a therapy session. It could be for me. I'm not going to hog the podcast talking about myself the entire time because the book is super important. But yeah, thank you very much. Really, really amazing work. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. I mean, you've been talking to people for 40 years.
Yep.
Yeah. I was going to say, can you give us a quick overview of what inspired you to write this book and what you want people to take away from it? Yeah. Go.
Yeah.
Let's have it.
Okay, so I just to clarify, so people understand this story I'm about to tell about what I learned from boys and young men, is I'm a developmental psychologist, which means I study children and teenagers, and I follow them over time. So I follow the same kids over time, which is important to the story I'm about to tell. That the patterns I'm telling you are the patterns that I hear while boys go through adolescence. So that's 12 years old till about 18, 19.
Yep.
And you hear their voices changing as they go through adolescence. And the reason I know they change, it's the same kid over many, many years. So we study hundreds and hundreds of boys and young men, and actually kids with all other identities. But the story that nobody's listening to is the stories coming from boys and young men. So I don't only study that population, but they're the ones telling the story that's important. And the reason I study social emotional development among young people. That's what I've been doing since 1987, is doing these studies on the social emotional development of young people, where I follow teenagers from early adolescence to late adolescence. Essentially, the reason I started to focus on friendships in particular among boys and young men, which was my previous book called Deep Secrets, Boys, Friendships, and the Crisis of Connection, that was turned into an Oscar-nominated movie and all sorts of fancy things, is because in 1987 and 1988, when I was a high school counselor, as part of my graduate training at Harvard at the time, I was hearing boys talk obsessively about their friendships. And that surprised me, because I thought they were going to talk about their girlfriends or their teachers or their parents, struggles in those relationships. All they wanted to talk about is their friendships, their struggle to find good friendships, their struggles with betrayal when other guys betray them. I was just stunned. This is 1988. I was stunned that friendships were talked about so much. So I really became interested as a developmental psychologist, which is interested in child development, is that what is going on that we're not telling this story about boys' friendships? Like, what is going on? So I started basically in 1995 to get these big federally funded studies to study friendships, essentially, for the kids of all different identities, and to see what happens to their friendships as they go through adolescence, when they become adults. And I started to do these studies, and I came out with a book, Deep Secrets, which is, again, a book that came about 10 years ago. And it tells 4 themes that I learned from boys and young men in my studies of hundreds of boys followed over time. And I'll tell you the 4 themes very quickly. Okay. And my new book, Rebels, in some ways takes that argument of what we learn from boys and shows how it's relevant to all of us, not just if you're a boy or a man. So the 4 themes where I heard from boys and young men. Number 1, that boys and these are hundreds of boys, so this is not just me talking to a couple boys.
Yeah.
These are hundreds of boys. Talk very, very clearly at ages 12, 13, 14, 15 about their desire for intimate male friendships, their desire for deep connection, their desire to be able to be vulnerable without being laughed at, their desire to be seen and heard as they see themselves with other guys. and the difficulty, right? The difficulty of finding them, but some of them in the early adolescence had those friendships. So they talked about the love for their friends, the love, the way they depend on them, so even when they're trying to fake that everything's okay, their friends will know that something's not okay. And they use it, you saw that, Tim, in the language. They use these beautiful emotional language, and articulate it. I mean, part of the stunning thing is when you listen to boys, when they're given a safe space to talk about it, they're so eloquent. They're so emotionally articulate in terms of what they want. So this is number one, was the wanting friendships. Number two, they were very clear that friendships are critical for their mental health. So we keep on getting it wrong about mental health. We think mental health gets in the way of having friendships. Well, I'm sure it does. But really what the trajectory is that it's the crisis of what I call the crisis of connection, which I'll tell you about in a second. It's the lack of friendships that leads to the mental health problems. So we have to understand that to solve the mental health problems, it can't just be therapy and medication. It has to be actually helping young people and old people have friendships, because that's the predictor of mental health problems. So that's the second thing, that they need them. They need friendships, or else they'd go, these are quotes, they'd go wacko, they'd feel all alone and want to kill themselves. I mean, these are directly quotes from boys, right? That they say, if I don't have these friendships, I would want to go wacko, I would want to kill myself, okay? Third theme is that as they got older, remember, it's the same kid over time. As these boys got older, all of a sudden their voices started to change. The emotional vulnerability of their language shifted. They started to sound like stereotypic boys. It doesn't matter, whatever, it's okay, we're all good, but I don't need close friendships, basically, right? And I call it a crisis of connection, because you started to hear boys disconnect from what they really want and try to convince me, as the interviewer and my other researchers who were interviewing, that they didn't actually need friendships and, it was okay. But at the same time, their language was incredibly depressed oftentimes, a sense of sadness that they didn't have the friendships that they wanted, or they're giving up on that search. And then also that's exactly the age that boys start to die by suicide. And so the idea is that exactly what they predicted when they were younger, that they would want to kill themselves if they don't have the friendships. You actually hear them in late adolescence, that's 15, 16, 17, talk about this crisis of connection and have enormous feelings of depression around not having the relationships they want. The fourth and final theme that is critical, this is my big point in the new book, is the reason for the crisis of connection. Well, that's the big question we keep on not getting right. Why are so many of us disconnected from ourselves and each other? Why? And we keep on saying it's technology, or it's, men, or it's women, or it's, whatever, it's Trump, whatever it is, right? And it's not any of those things. It's an entire culture, modern, you can call it modern culture, right? 20th and 21st century culture. But I call it boy culture, boy in quotation, which means it's an ideology in modern culture that privileges the individual over the relationship, self over other, independence over connection, what we call the hard parts of ourselves over the soft sides. Everything that we stereotype as masculine is privilege over everything we stereotype as feminine. It's not masculine and feminine, Tim. It's human. Thinking and feeling is human. Thinking is not a masculine trait. Feeling is not a feminine trait. It's thinking and feeling. All humans need to think and feel. And the minute we give a gender identity, right, to thinking and feeling, we're in trouble. Because we need thinking and feeling to act like a real person. So the fourth theme, just to repeat it, is a cultural ideology that actually clashes with our human nature, which is we're social animals. We know that from the research. We need each other. We're starving for each other. We're born in relationship, all those kinds of beautiful connected things that we are naturally. We live in a culture that doesn't value that doesn't value our relational side, that doesn't value our friendships, especially for boys and men, that doesn't value our soft sides, that makes it possible for us to have friendships. Because you can't have friendships if you're not willing to be sensitive to somebody's feelings, or to be able to be sensitive to your own, you know what I mean? You can't have without your soft sides. So if you only value the hard sides, the independence, the autonomy, the stoicism, and you don't also value the soft sides, you're not going to have the relationships you want. So they taught us those four things. And then to just quickly finish by answering the question as it relates to my newest book, Rebels with a Cause, then it became obvious in the thousands of emails I got after Deep Secrets came out, and I got thousands, and I still get thousands, were people saying, not just men, people saying, you're telling my story. That's my story. That's my story. That's my struggle. Did I get it more from boys and men? Absolutely. But I started to get it also from girls and women, from non-gender conforming kids. I started to hear that everybody was suffering from a crisis of connection, living in a culture that clashes with our nature. And do boys and men suffer more than everybody else regarding friendships, same-sex friendships? Absolutely. Because one of the things we talk about being a real man is not needing other people, and so especially not needing other men, because that we've sexualized that as gay, right? So the idea is that we still think that needing another person, a same-sex person, is girly and gay, which is like the most the most crazy thing, that a human need for another human has been sexualized and gendered. So the idea is that they show us these four things, and it is relevant to all of us. And so the solution is, which we'll get to eventually, but the solution is to disrupt the boy culture that causes, right, and to create a culture that nurtures our nature, basically.
That's amazing. I mean, such validation, like you talked about, from all those emails, people reaching out to you of the theme that's obviously come through in these 40 years is
Totally.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then could you imagine someone making a film about it?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand, I said this to you earlier, but I'm going to repeat it again because your listeners would probably be interested. When you're a researcher, you sit for years and years and years with your data. In this case, it was narrative data. And you're trying to understand it. You're trying to understand what the story is that these young people, hundreds of young people, are telling you. So when I finally figured out this is what they're telling me about the crisis of connection, and they're telling me about the cultural roots of the crisis of connection. But it's something that you figure out in your head by listening to the narrative. So then when I started getting thousands of emails, from people saying, you're telling my story, and then a movie was made about it. The movie's called Close. It's a Belgian film about two 13-year-old boy friendship. It was so moving to me that I was actually able to hear what boys and men were telling me, right, in a profound way, and that nobody has, still to this day, Tim, nobody's telling the story except me in terms of those boys. The only time we hear this story is when you listen to the boys that have been part of my studies in classrooms.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Just side note, actually, the people that were emailing, was it all different ages? So people are hearing,
I mean, this is the most amazing thing. So it would be, I get a lot of kids, of course. I get a lot of kids who write me, particularly a lot of boys. But I also get 70 and 80-year-old people who say, I get amazing quotes. They say things like, I wish my dad had your work when he was younger. He wouldn't have been so messed up. Or I'm 80 years old. I've been trying to find friendships my whole life since my adolescence, and now I'm close with my daughter, but it's not quite the same. I mean, I get this from old men, from young men, from middle-aged men. Interestingly enough, this is interesting. It's a question for you, Tim. I get if I were to count what age groups I get from, I get the least resonance from men between, I would say, about 35 to 45, 35 to 50. And that's also when the suicide rate is off the charts for men. It's in middle age that suicide rate is extremely high for men in middle age. And I would argue, well, why do you think that's the case? Why do you think 40 to 55 I sort of get the least resonance with what I'm saying? And also there's the highest suicide rate. What among that group?
I mean, golly. Is it like a real high stress time for guys? So it's like peak doom. Like
totally. I think what happens is, I think those who are most depressed, the most depressed, are so trying hard not to be connected to their feelings, because it's scary to be connected to your feelings when you're really depressed. Because you're very bleak and potentially suicidal. So I think to hear the story that captures exactly why you're depressed, they don't want to hear it. So they'll do things like when they'll call in on radio shows, and I always ask their age because I know exactly their age when they push back, and they'll say things like, well, ma'am, I don't really know what you're talking about because that's not true for me. And I'll say, okay, well, and I'll respond always graciously because I appreciate that they're responding to my comment. And I'll say, so tell me about, what friends you do have. And they say, well, I have a lot of guys I hang out with. I don't have problems with friendships. I have lots of guys I hang out with. And then I'll oftentimes ask the question, well, do you have anybody you could talk to if your wife or if you have a wife, obviously, if your wife and you were arguing, or if you were having financial problems, or if something happened, that was shameful for you? Do you have a guy you could talk to? And they will always say, Tim, oh no, I wouldn't talk to them about that. And then they will oftentimes come around and say, well, it'd be nice to have a friend like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, you get what I'm saying? So their first response is sort of a defensive, like, I don't know why you're thinking I don't have what I need. But the reality is they don't have what they want and need. Often, not everybody. I mean, obviously there's variation, and some men have lots of friends and meaningful friendships. So I'm not trying to homogenize all people.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's a common theme is all I'm saying.
I think when I look back at my own sort of good friendships during my sort of teen years and stuff like that versus now, I think you sort of life does get in the way a little bit, or it seems to at this age. I'm in my 40s as well now, and so my friends used to just turn up at the back door. They'd come in and sit and drink tea. We'd listen to music and we'd hang out for like no reason apart from the togetherness that we'd get. Now what it feels like is it's like got to be scheduled, or you need a reason, or oh, we're going to go trail running today, or we're going to go mountain biking, or we're going to come and help you fix your fence, or there's always kind of got to be a reason. That kind of hang out thing has kind of gone a little bit, and I don't know if that's the connection that you're talking about, the opportunity to actually connect, because you can hang out with people, but are you actually connecting? And I think that's
no, and most people are,
yeah.
and part of boy culture, I'll give you an example to answer your question in part. So part of boy culture, and again, I want to make your listeners know, when I say boy culture, the whole phrase is not in quotations. It's not boy culture in quotations. It's boy in quotations, meaning it's not a real boy. It's a cartoon character who only values his hard side and not his soft side. And the reason why it's a cartoon character, not a real boy, is because I've been listening to boys for 40 years. And they all have their hard and soft side, and they all value their soft side. All of them value their soft side. So this caricature that there's a boy out there that only values his hard side, which is the whole culture we live in, that we only value our hard sides, is a stereotype. It's a stereotype that's not true. So I call it boy culture in quotations with the boy around the word boy. And part of boy culture is they tell us stories that aren't true. And I'll tell you one story that's not true about human connection. We think that human connection at this point, we're so disconnected from ourselves. This is what we think is human connection. I share something about me, and then you share something about you. And maybe even make it intimate. That's like what we do on social media. So I say things like, I got divorced, a decade ago or whatever. And I say something, it was a difficult divorce. And then you say something like, I'm struggling with my partner, or whatever. And that's going to form connection. That doesn't form connection.
Yeah.
What forms connection is me actually saying, so Tim, tell me about your experiences. And then actually asking you, we call it interpersonal curiosity, a curiosity about you, your thoughts and feelings, and what I can learn from you and learn about me through you. And that's what creates connection. But we do this, what I call parallel play in relationships or in friendships, where it's, by what I mean by parallel play, we're both sort of telling our own story, but neither person's listening to the other person. And they're just focused on, when can I get my time to talk? And that doesn't form friendships. That doesn't form friendships.
Is that because people are, what it feels like to me is that people are desperate to try and form friendships. But they're going about it in the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also what happens. I'm going to say this because it's so obvious once I say it, but people can't believe that they didn't realize it themselves. Okay, so in our world, I would estimate, we have never done a world survey, but we're going to do one, and maybe we can do one in New Zealand. You're in New Zealand, right? Yeah. The number of people who feel listened to, but I would guesstimate in the United States, based on my students, et cetera, that about 80% of us do not feel listened to. Most of us do not feel listened to. I'm not talking about anybody, but generally, if you say, do you feel listened to by most people, or at least over 50%, will say no, even though I'm listened to by my boyfriend or whatever it is. If you don't feel listened to, Tim, I really want your listeners to hear this. If you don't feel listened to, it is almost impossible for you to listen to somebody else. Because otherwise, because you're thinking, if you don't listen to me, why would I listen to you?
Mm.
So, if you don't feel listened to, it doesn't, everybody knows that. Kids know that. It doesn't generate your interest in another person. If you feel like someone's looking at their watch, metaphorically or literally, while you're talking, you have no curiosity about them because why would you? They're not
Mm.
curious about you. So someone has to break the cycle,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
And say like basically, and the whole point, the solution to disrupt the boy culture, to be very clear and straightforward, is we teach a practice in our listening project in schools, a practice of listening with curiosity. We call it transformative interviewing, where people are using our 9 practices. You saw that in the book, the
Mm.
9 practices of listening with curiosity, that actually help us ask questions of each other in a meaningful way so that we each feel seen and heard and thus more curious about the other, because we won't be more curious until we feel listened to. And
Yeah.
then if you're listening to me, then I'm naturally more curious in you, Tim, once you're
Mm.
curious in me. And so we have to start, this sounds kind of superficial, but it's not superficial. We have to totally reimagine how we engage with each other. We have to totally reimagine it so that we start from our 5-year-old self that looks at each other with wonder, right? With curiosity, with what can you teach me about you, but also about me. And
Mm.
that is literally the beginning of transforming the culture, is starting from our natural capacity, our 5-year-old capacity, to look at each other with a sense of wonder, right? Rather than with a sense of judgment or you're an idiot or you agree with me, so I like you. You get what I'm saying? We have
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
reimagine it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think we can reimagine it is because it's a 5-year-old capacity. It's natural. It's natural
Mm.
within us to do it. So we
Yeah.
just have to nourish our nature rather than teach someone something.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot the sort of, I guess, the sort of will for people to do that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really struggle with the how, but I think I do see a lot of people with the will, particularly when it does come to like engaging with those close to you. Maybe it's your young kids, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people that I've spoken to feel like they actually struggle when their kids, say the kids are 5 or 6 or
Yeah.
7 or whatever. They'll
Yeah.
ask, maybe the kids will ask a question and the parents will over answer,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
kid's
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Or yeah, or the kids are going chirp 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 and the parents like want to shut them down or something.
Yeah,
It's
totally, totally.
yeah.
That happens more than we'd like to admit as adults.
Mm,
That kids are asking a lot of questions and we shut them down. We do that all the time. And
yeah.
imagine what that does to them, right? To their curiosity.
Yeah.
That we say enough with the questions.
Yeah.
And I would say it's, partly why parents, when they ramble on and their kids are sort of rolling their eyes. The reason why they're rolling their eyes is because the parent isn't actually talking to the kid oftentimes. They're
Mm,
trying to teach them a moral lesson or something.
yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's what the kid is rolling their eyes about. Like it's not actually talking to them like they do like a normal person. It's
Yeah.
always this trying to get them to see something.
Mm,
And then and kids are super wickedly intelligent. So I mean they are. They're
yeah.
like they're more intelligent, quite frankly, than we are. We become sort of less intelligent growing up in boy culture. So they sense that we're trying to teach them something, and then it's irritating to listen. It's always
Mm,
irritating to listen to someone when they're sort of speaking down to you and telling you, in sort of pretending to tell you a story, but it's a really moral lesson.
it's a lesson. Yeah.
It's like give me a break, like shut up already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, they're not actually shutting us down. They're wanting us to really speak to them like a real person.
Mm,
Like if they have a question, just like answer the question. Don't try to teach me something. And so with the and young people, we can't shut them down with their questions.
no.
Every single question. I'm sorry to say to parents, I know this is hard, but every single question should be responded to. Every single question.
Yeah.
Take it seriously, engage, and if you can't do it right this second, then say, "Give me 10 minutes. I have to finish this, and then I'm going to try to answer your question."
Mm,
Right? You just got to do it
yeah. No,
because that's right.
I agree. I do. I wonder, like, the analysis of that particular problem, though. Like, a lot of people do blame modern technology,
Yeah,
that sort
I
of
know.
stuff. But
I know.
is it actually more of a vicious
Yeah,
cycle hangover from
totally,
the culture?
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, does technology exacerbate the problem of boy culture? Obviously,
Mm,
obviously. The way we use technology now is boy culture because
Mm,
it's all it's all about, do you like my post? Not am I likable? It's, do you like what I've posted? So
mm,
think about how toxic that kind of design feature is on social media. So it's all about being right. It's all about, do you like? Am I sexy? Am I cute? Am I funny? Or have I done really impressive things? Whatever it is, rather than actually engaging with each other around,
mm,
right, mutual curiosities and asking each other questions. And you could change the design of technology, easy peasy. You don't make it all about a like function or a heart function. You create a curiosity function where people are encouraged to ask questions of each other. I mean,
mm.
basically, I'm just saying, it's not technology. Letter writing and phone calls are technology. We never thought letter writing killed our children. It's
Yeah.
right. It's the way we engage with technology that's killing our children, because
Mm,
it's making it seem as if friendships are how many you have, first of all. Like, if you have 1,000, then that's good. If you only have four, then that sucks, right? That's totally false. That's totally
mm.
false. And secondly, not only is it about the quantity of your friendships rather than the quality, but it's also this notion that in order to get a friend, you have to be really sexy and pretty and post funny things. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Mm.
that's so boy culture. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
not about the relationship, the quality of the relationship. It's about what you look like or what you can do or how many friends you have. That's all toxic stuff.
Is there
Because
something around the missing piece if we're in a sort of this crisis of connection?
yeah.
Is it something, are people looking for connection in the wrong places? Is that if
Well,
that's the missing piece, is it like
no, I would honestly, no, I would push back on that. I get what you're
yeah?
saying. I get what you're saying. But I would say you could easily create a technology that fosters, for example, curiosity.
Hmm.
I've been trying to get I won't name names, but I've been trying to get various social media spaces to take seriously that you could totally change technology if you made it about not being liked, right?
Hmm.
Not doing things that people like, but that fostering curiosity, helping people nurture their natural 5-year-old curiosity about what people post. Where did
Yeah.
you learn to cook, if it's a cooking thing, on TikTok? Where did you learn to cook? How did you cook? What was your first meal that you learned to cook with your mom? What kind of ingredients do you use? How do you find those ingredients? I mean, my point is, rather than saying, "Oh my God, you're an amazing cook," like, "Wow, that's an amazing dish you made. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. You're so amazing. You're so amazing." Right? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
even though that feels good, it's like a drug. It feels good at the moment. It's not good for long-term liberation. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? Like, it
Yeah.
feels
Absolutely.
good at the moment. It's like I call it resistance for survival. It's for survival because it feels like a drug. Oh, they like me. They like me. They like me. But then ultimately you feel totally alone because it's not, because human relationships are not simply about whether people like me.
Mm.
It's about whether you feel connected to somebody else. And to me, we're even having this conversation, Tim, is so reflective of our times. I mean, I just don't believe, I'm not idealizing previous times. Previous times were just probably fucked up for different reasons. Sorry, screwed up for different
Yeah.
reasons. But the point is that it's unbelievable how intelligent we're born. We know
Mm.
how to make connection, that we grow up to then have the question about, quality matters in
Mm.
friendships. Like, come on, Tim, do you get what I'm
Yeah.
being?
Oh,
I'm saying?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. I think. Yeah. I mean, it's what's so interesting is that the suppression of the avoidance of those feelings. Where's that narrative come
I,
from?
I have an answer for you because I know it,
Yeah.
because I've been
Yeah.
talking to people for a long time.
Yeah.
It's because everybody, this is the weird thing. This is weird, actually. I even have this in my class. It happens all the time. For some reason, because boy culture so convinces us that if you have feelings, you're not normal,
Mm.
right? That most boys and men, and even non-gender conforming kids and girls and women, think that if they think and feel, they're not normal. You get what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Yeah.
so if you think you're not normal, you think you're the only one suffering in the way that you're suffering. So how many times have I told boys when they say, well, it might be nice to be a girl because then I wouldn't have to be emotionless. And I'll say something like, well, I've heard that from thousands of young men. So why don't you guys just start feeling? Because every boy
Clearly.
is telling me that. Like, why are you not feeling? Because everybody's telling me it might be nice to be a girl. And then they'd say, what?
Mm.
And I'm like, every boy I have ever interviewed, thousands at this point, for almost 40 years, has suggested or directly said that they have feelings too, and that they're comfortable expressing them if given a safe space. So, but people feel they're the only ones, and so because they think they're the only ones, they buy into the BS, right? Because they don't want to be. They think that this is the screwed up thing. They think that if they express who they really are, which is they think and feel, right? They have a soft side and a hard side, that they will be rejected. That they will be rejected if they express both sides of their humanity. And that is the false story that boy culture perpetuates. That if you have two sides to your humanity, a hard and a soft, a sensitivity, right, and a stoicism, that somehow that makes you not normal, especially if you're a man, right? Especially if you're a man. And so the idea is that's the way that's why we do things that work against our interest, because we don't want to be seen as not normal.
It's just so incredible because I mean I've literally felt the pull. I've felt the okay, I've got to suppress this feeling, or this isn't going to feel good, so I'm going to like try and ignore it. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful narrative that you
Totally.
can have an emotion welling up inside you that I'm not going to see this person for a year because they're doing a overseas experience or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And he's like, I better suppress this for what gain? It's
I
very
know.
weird.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, I have to say, speaking as a woman, I feel that way at times because in many ways, I'm such a gender stereotype because I'm very expressive and I'm very extroverted and, I have long hair and all those kinds of things. And so I will sometimes, and I'm a psychologist, et cetera, et cetera. I will sometimes feel that the pressure. I mean, it's not the same pressure that you feel, but I'm just feeling. I will sometimes feel the pressure to rein it in. You know what I mean? To not be so emotionally expressive, to not, especially with my students or with my, my colleagues, because I'm worried that I won't be taken seriously. So even though you feel it more than I do, given that you're a man, it's weird that even women feel that because they want to man up. We're starting to hear now girls and women want to man up even more than boys and men in some communities because they get that they'll get access to positions of power more if they rein in their sensitivity. And so you end up sometimes getting women acting, quite frankly, I mean, this is going to be offensive to a lot of people, but it's okay, even acting more sort of stereotypically manly in a negative way. You get women doing that more than men at times. You know what I mean? Where they're sort of pretending they have no feelings. And you're like, you must have feelings here. There's no way you don't have feelings. But I'm just saying why I want your listeners to hear it's the waters in which we swim, which I always say, but it's a helpful metaphor. Because the idea is we're swimming in cultural waters that only values half of our humanity. And if we raise our kids to only value their hard sides and not their soft sides, we are always going to have problems. And we will have particular problems with boys and men because we do that messaging even harder with boys and men, right? They only can have a hard side or else they're not a man. With girls and women, we at least allow them to have a soft side, but then we mock them when they try to have a hard side because we think they're acting like a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So it's sort of like we have to realize I'll say it again, if we raise our children to go against their nature, which is to have hard and soft sides, we are going to have problems. And in our culture, that's what we're doing. And if we raise our children to not value the very relationships they want, the friendships that we all want, we're all desperate for, we're going to have problems because that's what all of us want fundamentally. And most of all is friendships, right? As you said at the beginning of the interview.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think of my own experience. I was brought up by a single mum. I was homeschooled for a chunk of my education. I'll say it's, not exactly normal. And I don't remember a heavy sort of masculine culture really sort of coming down on top of me and, masculine male role models or anything like that. But clearly I've been massively affected by everything that you're talking about. It's still wormed its way in. And so I was just interested, like, you've talked to, from sort of 12 years old upwards, is that kind of bandwidth. Where does it start and how does it start and what are its vectors for actually
Yeah.
getting in.
Yeah. So remember various things. Remember, it's not just the reason why I do not use the word masculinity
Mm,
or toxic masculinity, because it's not about masculinity. It's about everything we've deemed as hard over soft, which is not necessarily only masculinity. So, for example, going into the STEM fields, math and science, valuing
mm,
math and science more than humanities and poetry, and valuing being a banker over a teacher or being a doctor over a nurse. I mean, that's
yeah.
all boy culture. Valuing your a me over a we. That's boy culture. And I don't care where you are politically, the most progressive family that doesn't even believe in gender identities at all,
Yeah.
you are perpetuating boy culture. Because
Right.
no, I'm serious. I don't
Yeah.
care
Yeah.
what. I don't care if you're the most liberal family ever, and your son is a transgendered boy, and et cetera, et cetera. You are perpetuating boy culture
Hmm.
because I'll give you an example from me personally because I want every parent to hear this. My daughter was in high school, and I spent 4 years asking her the only question based. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. Asking her, did she do her homework and how'd she do on her test?
Right.
All she wanted to talk about was her friendships. That's all she wanted to talk about. And all I was interested in is did she do her homework? How much homework did she have? And how'd she do on her test? I can't imagine as a child having my mother or my father or my grandmother ask me pretty much every week the very questions that were judgmental, right? Because
Hmm.
if I didn't do well on my test, I'd have to tell her, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that didn't speak to what I really wanted, which is friendships and what she wanted me to be interested in. And then I finally came around and could see how I was torturing her. She wanted me to interest in what she was interested in. Is she was having difficulty finding close friendships, right, in high school, and she wanted to process that. And I basically thought it was a waste of time because at some point she was struggling a bit in her classes. So the point is that, and I was focused on getting her a tutor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to me, we're all perpetuating it just to different degrees. Are there certain
Mm,
families that perpetuate boy culture more than others? Obviously.
yeah. Yeah.
But I'm saying even the most lefty progressive family, homeschooled, I promise you that you're getting it in some form from your home, but then also just once you go out into the world. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in the movies. It's everywhere on social media and technology, how we talk. That we pay teachers and nurses and home care people nothing, and we pay scientists and computer scientists and sports stars enormous
Yeah.
salaries. That
Yeah.
that kids are smart. They get that.
Yeah.
If you pay nothing to a teacher or a nurse or a home care worker, and you pay $50 million to someone who plays baseball. I mean, are you kidding me? You
Yeah.
know, that gives a message about hard, being hard.
Mm, yeah.
Playing sport rather than caring for someone,
Yeah.
right? Even the difference between being a kindergarten teacher and being a professor. People think it's fancy I'm a professor. They don't think it's fancy when you're a kindergarten teacher. But I would actually argue that being a kindergarten teacher is much harder because you have to really attune to the needs of each child in that classroom in a way you don't when you're a college professor.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? So, but we don't see it we see it as a sort of kind of, lovely job for women to do.
Yeah.
But like a little weird if a guy wanted to be a kindergarten teacher, like we'd wonder whether he was a pedophile. I mean, basically we would pathologize it.
Mm,
And I'm not saying everybody would, and et cetera, but you know what I mean? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
you get that message, and kids are not stupid. They get this message from how we pay professions, how we talk about professions, what your parents want you to be and don't
Mm,
want you to be,
mm,
right? That gives a message. What do they want you to be? They want you to do something that really makes money. Well, why? As long as you can put food on the table, why are we so obsessed with their kids making a lot of money?
mm,
Why? That's just
yeah.
boy culture.
Yeah.
So I just think it's everywhere. It's not one specific thing. The reason why you see the transition in adolescence is because we have less of those feelings about boys. When they're 10 or 11 or 12, we let them cry more. Like when you have an 8-year-old
Yeah.
crying at a soccer game, we don't shame them when they're 8. I mean,
Yeah.
like when they're crying at a soccer game, especially if it's a progressive community,
Yeah.
we don't shame them that the goalie is crying, right, for missing a goal. By the time they're 16, we definitely shame them if they
Mm,
started crying that they missed a goal, right? And so the idea is that we tolerate their soft side more when they're younger. And then as they get older, we tolerate it less. And same with girls. I mean, we'll tolerate a lot of, sort of fighting and stuff when they're under 10. And
mm,
by the time they're older, we're just like, okay, stop it.
yeah.
You know, You know what I mean? So I just think it's because the adolescence is so important to me because it's exactly when we become an adult that all the problem starts,
Yeah.
right? And I fundamentally say, I'm going to say a very big statement on this show, is that honestly, it's the adults that are causing the problem. It's the adults that are causing the problem. And we're doing a campaign now in my Think and Do Tank project for the advancement of our common humanity called, given the craziness happening in the United States now, called "What Would Your Children Say?"
Mm.
Just like, the Jesus, what would Jesus say?
Yeah, yeah,
What's,
yeah.
what would your children say? Because I would say over the past century, our children are our moral anchor. They're our moral conscience. They're the ones that have been protesting war, right? Protesting climate change. You get what I'm saying, Tim?
Yeah,
They're
yeah, absolutely.
they're disrupting gender binaries. Are you kidding me? They're at the
Mm.
forefront of that, just disrupting gender binaries, reimagining sex, given this is sex and space,
Mm.
right? Reimagining what it means to have sex. I mean, they are at the forefront of change and they're our moral conscience
Mm.
at this point. So to me, I want all adults listening to this show is even what we talked about today is what would your children say about what we're saying? Because my guess is they would resonate very deeply with what we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's so insightful. I mean, I think that's really interesting in terms of the finding solutions for this. I had a very similar conversation with someone, and they were just like, "Yeah, children are the answer. Children are the
Yeah.
answer to, it might sound a little bit like kicking the can down the road for
No,
for
no,
our generation, but like
no.
actually, like this was in the context of climate change. Actually, that it's like energy saving light bulbs are going to be like old hat, completely normal for kids,
Yeah,
in 10 years. Whereas,
yeah,
our parents were like freaking out about, oh, these so expensive energy saving light bulbs,
yeah.
whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, no, exactly. But I would I would add something to that conversation. It's not just that children are our future, which they are,
Mm.
but I also think we need to start paying attention that they're teaching us, they're
Yeah.
reminding us what we used to be when we were moral human beings,
Yeah.
and we are fundamentally money over people means, which is our whole culture, right?
Mm.
Means we are fundamentally an immoral culture,
Mm.
amoral and immoral culture, and that's because we have grown up to be immoral. We weren't born immoral.
Mm.
We were born moral, and even Charles Darwin argues that we're the reason why we've survived as a species because we're born moral with a sense of right and wrong, and then we grow up losing our way
Mm.
about right and wrong and start putting money over people, and that's deeply immoral. And our children remind us that we're actually naturally moral, social, oriented towards relationships, friendships. They remind us that. So we need to be thinking not just that they're our future, but what do we learn from listening to children and teenagers
Mm.
about them, but about ourselves
Yeah.
and how to solve our own problems.
Well, that's what was profound about your book for me was the parts where you're actually allowing or sort of allowing the voices of those sort of examples of the different teenagers in there to sort of come through. I really like that, that it's their voices. It's not,
Yeah,
of course there's analysis in the book
yeah, of
and all the
course.
rest of it, but
Yeah,
what's so cool is it sometimes takes a while to tune in a little
I
bit
know.
to the kind of
I know.
language they're using,
I
but
know.
you're just like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I hear you. It's
Yeah,
it's interesting.
yeah. No, no, and the thing is this is interesting. I could put another point in here. So, um, you know, so I've been compared to a lot of people, including Richard Reeves, et cetera, and different people are writing about boys. And the thing that I get frustrated with is that unlike a lot of people in this space, including Richard Reeves, although I think some of the things he says I think are important, but they are talking about their opinions
Mm,
based on either having sons or even being possibly a therapist or whatever. But they have sons and they have opinions. Um, I am talking directly what boys tell us,
mm,
right? What they're saying. Like it might be nice to be a girl because then I wouldn't have to be emotionless. Like I'm not saying my opinion about boys and young men.
mm.
I'm saying literally what they say. And that is why there are so many quotes in my book. Because
Yeah,
I'm trying to tell you, I didn't do some magical potion on the data. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
literally just, they say it.
yeah,
They say, do they say directly, I have a crisis of connection? No, that's an interpretation. But they do say, I'm struggling to find the friendships that I want. And what I want is friends that I can be vulnerable and not be laughed at.
yeah,
So they say it. So when people like, Richard Reeves or whomever, I mean, he's been critical of that book. It always stuns me because it's like, what are you being critical of? Because it's like, I'm just reporting what the boys said.
Yeah.
So, you can't really disagree with them. Like, how can you disagree with what they're saying? Like, it doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
And
No, it
so,
doesn't.
and so people, and I think the reason is because people are so used to not listening, and just they think I'm just spouting off my opinion, and then they're just disagreeing with me. And
Mm.
I'm now saying in every interview, Tim, literally every interview, I'm saying this is not my opinion. This is
Yeah.
about what boys and young men have said for almost 40 years now, directly
Mm.
said. And so even when people will do a funny thing, like they'll say, "Well, I'm always citing you. I have to cite somebody else," and I'm like, "You're not citing me.
You're
You're
citing.
citing research finding,
Yeah.
right?" And I'm the only one at the moment, unfortunately, that has those research findings, because I'm the only one that I know of, at least, that has been listening for as long as I have.
Yeah.
So I just think that's fascinating to me.
So in the 40 years, I guess, is it going to take us another 40 to unpick this? What sort of hope have you got?
No,
No.
no, this is my hope. Yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
and it's good to end on that hope too, because I have a lot of hope. The hope that basically comes from, remember the boys and young men and other young people too, and I'm a teacher too, so I exposed to lots of young people regardless of their identities. But young boys and young men remind us that we have naturally, our natural curiosity, the capacity to solve our own problems. We just have to do it. So it's
Mhm.
not something we have to teach. It's not something we have to like now teach astrophysics, right? For us to
Yeah.
solve the crisis of connection, right?
Yeah.
It's that we naturally have these skills to solve our own problems. And secondly, so remember, it's a natural skill, and it's not biological problem, it's a cultural problem.
Mm.
So if you think it's, as a seventh grader told me once, a 12-year-old said, if you think it's biology, you don't think you can change it. But if you know it's cultural, you can change it. So the second hope is that it's cultural. We
Mm.
change our culture all the time. Are you kidding me? We
Yeah.
now have same-sex marriage legalized in this country. I never thought when I was younger we'd ever have same-sex marriage legalized. So, I mean, we change all the time. We had Obama, and then we have Trump, and now we had Biden, and then we have Trump. I mean,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
changing our culture all the time.
Yeah.
American culture, but culture around the world. I was born in Paris, France. I mean, that French culture has radically changed. I mean, the point is we're changing our culture all the time. So that's not a big lift to change our culture. We do it all the time. And then finally, we basically the young people are insisting on it, Tim. They're
Mm.
insisting on the change.
Yeah.
They're being louder. They're being louder about, in their words and in their actions, including in their violence, wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're being louder and more insistent to shut up already, grown-ups, and listen to what we have to say and do something about it, like the gun control young people, like the
Yeah. Yeah.
climate change young people, like the anti-war in the Middle East stuff, the anti-war young people.
Mm.
They are saying, stop it, stop it,
Yeah.
and focus on what we need and what you need, which is meaningful community and connection and belongingness and all those lovely things.
Yeah.
And so to me, those four things it's tremendously hopeful,
Yeah.
because we're already changing. I mean, even the fact, Tim, you're interviewing me, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? I mean, even the fact that my book is getting so much attention,
Yeah.
is a reflection of the change. Because
Yeah. No,
ultimately, you know,
I agree. I think it is hopefully going to move in the right direction, and I think that what I take away from it is that the different age groups are going to have to respond in slightly different ways to unlearn certain things. I think you're
yeah,
absolutely right about the younger
yeah,
generation now.
yeah,
They almost know what they need and want, but I think
yeah,
for the, especially as people that are either coming into being parents or in their 40s or something like
yeah,
that, they're going to have to deal with things slightly differently. There's going to be a bit of
totally,
self reflection. For me, the
totally,
book was very
totally, yeah,
reflective. Um,
totally.
there's people I need to reach out and to apologize to. There's people I need to
Good, 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 good.
reach
That's good.
out and
Yeah,
actually tell them thank yous and
yeah,
stuff like that. So yeah,
good,
I think
good, good, good.
hopefully that can small changes maybe
Yeah.
in those
No, but,
ones.
but,
Yeah.
but change it, a million small changes is massive change. So
Mm.
all I'm doing, honestly, for me, it's one person at a time,
Yeah.
right? It's one person at a time. So I'm on interviews constantly at this point. I accept every single interview. Uh, I think I've accepted every single interview, because I'm one person at a time,
Yeah.
one journalist at a time, to spread the message of what boys and young men have been teaching us for a long time, and obviously all other young people. And I'm only
Mm.
focused on boys and young men, I have to say, because we stereotype them around this social emotional stuff more ferociously than other people. But I could tell you a story about what girls and women, and quite frankly, what non-gendered conforming kids have taught us, because they've taught us a lot too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not a sort of privileging of boys and young men, as I explained to my daughter. It's about the
I bet.
no, but really, I mean, seriously, she
Yeah.
said, "Mom, do you like boys and young men better than girls and women?" And I was like, "No, no, no." I said, "They teach us something that's important for all of us to hear, including why they're violent. And so if I want to stop the violence, which I do, against girls and women, which I do, against transgendered youth, which I do, right? Then I have to understand why they're being violent. You
Yeah.
get what I'm saying? So to
Absolutely.
me,
Yeah.
it's about, as I said at the beginning of the interview, I really do care about our common humanity.
Yeah.
So I care about everybody. I care about everybody, including people who voted for Trump. By the way, I think there's a reason that it has to do with boy culture that led them to find Trump attractive as a candidate.
Yeah.
And so I really do care about everybody. And that's the only way to move forward, is for all of us to care about everybody.
So you're positive about the future. That's awesome. We've all got work to do. We should all read your book, listen to your book. But you're absolutely right. Checking out this interview and all the other stuff that you're doing. I think one person at a time is a great philosophy. Because I'm just going to keep banging on about your book to everybody that I speak to. So
thank you. Yeah,
no,
and all the young people, thank you too.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So have you ended up to anything else interesting? Where can people find you? Get your book?
So my book website is niobe-way.com.
Yep.
So niobe-way.com. That's my book website. I have an email. I'll give out my email. People, it's totally fine to email me. I get about 1,000 emails a day, so
might take a while to reply.
That might take a while. But it's wayniobe@gmail.com. You're welcome to reach. I am, for good or for bad, all over the internet. So it's fairly easy to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff like that. I refuse to call it Meta. Are you supposed to call it Meta now?
Nah, I don't think so.
No. Yeah. Anyway,
no, doesn't work for me.
But anyway, so I'm on. I am not on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I will not call it the other thing. But anyways, but reach out with questions and stuff. And also, I love to hear when people have reactions to the book. I love getting reactions. I'm not too full of myself that I don't want to get reactions from readers, and I really do. And there's also the Audible version. So I read the book myself, and so you get me reading my own work, which was really time consuming but lovely to do. So
yeah, no, that's lovely. Nice for the car journeys and stuff like that. And
exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thanks for doing this, but thanks for writing the book. Thanks for sort of, tuning in to what these people were saying. I mean, I think it's super important. And there was a quote, I think it was on your website, was it, that someone said, this book might save America from itself.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that great? Isn't that a great quote?
It's a good one, that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Really hope you enjoyed that one. Hook us up with a like, follow, share, or subscribe wherever you found us. Thanks for listening. Until next time, safe travels, and we'll see you on the next one.